Crossover, good morning. How's everybody feeling? All right. Glad you guys are here today. Welcome to Woke Church part number 2, week number 2. We're having an honest conversation about race and injustice and how that affects us and how we as the church, if you're here and you're a believer in Jesus, like how do we respond to those things? How do we talk about those things properly? So last week was week 1 and we kind of laid a foundation and we talked about being aware. Being aware there's a situation. Being aware there's a problem. And so we talked about woke, and what does that even mean? If you're here today, you're not sure what that means. Kind of generally, it basically means if you're woke, you're not anymore naive, you're not in mental slavery, you know what's going on, you see. But we're taking that definition, we're leveling it up a little bit more, putting a spiritual twist on it and say, you know what, before you knew Jesus, you were dead in your sins. But now you're alive, you're awake, you're woke, right? But how many of y'all know every Christian is not always woke? Meaning you're not aware to the stuff that's going on around you. Sometimes we're just stuck in our own little world. We're not aware of the things that are happening to the right or to the left. And we got to be aware. Last week we talked about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. You know what? It includes justice. It's not a separate side dish. It's part of the main dish, the main course. And so look up there on the screens if you want to take a couple of notes real quick. Jesus said the second greatest commandment was to love your neighbor as what? As yourself. And guess what? So if your neighbor is going through some things, if they're being mistreated in an unjust way, we need to speak up. We need to talk about it. We need to give them a voice. We need to show them the love of Jesus, right? That's why our church is huge on loving our city. You see even people around the crowd. I see several people that have a Love Our City shirt on. We have all over, there's banners and posters on the building. Love Our City is something that we love to do in our community. Not just once a year we do a big serving week, but it's something we want to do on a regular basis. We want to encourage you guys to love your city where you're at all day, every day. And speaking of, we do a 1-week serving project in the spring. But so many people love it so much, we actually have a 1-day Love Our City that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So if you've never done Love Our City before, this is your chance to jump in. We're going to be doing over a dozen projects on Saturday, October the 5th. It's for a couple hours on that Saturday. You can look on the back of your program, jump in. We're going to live it out. So last week as we laid the foundation, we talked a little bit about American history. And we talked about the darker side of church history. A lot of times the side that's kind of just swept under the rug. The church usually doesn't speak about it or talk about it much. But the reality is a lot of Christians back in the day, they had slaves. A lot of churches back in the day were generally, in many parts of the country, they were okay with slavery. Last week we talked about the black church and ethnic churches were birthed because white churches didn't want those people around and didn't want them involved. It's church history, y'all. It's real. We got to talk about it. So we laid out this timeline because we wonder, why are things still so segregated? We laid out this timeline. Slavery was 246 years. Segregation was 89 years. We're only now in the 64th year of there being civil rights. And we know we still got some work to do with that, right? But the bottom line is, so for some of us that are younger or grew up in certain parts of the country where there wasn't as much of that going on, we could be like, man, I don't know what's the problem. Like, why isn't everybody just get along? If we look at the big picture and the timeline, we're still pretty new in this thing. We got a lot of work to do. That's why there's still a lot of segregation that's going on in our culture, in the workplace, in our neighborhoods, even in churches. What you might not know because you come to a church like Crossover is only 15% of churches in the United States are multi-ethnic. And that definition is that there's 20% diversity. That's not that diverse. But if you look around the room here at Crossover, a church that looks like this, that's as diverse as this, is less than 5% of churches in America. And those of you that come here on a regular basis, we can kind of take it for granted and think that this is just like how everybody is now, but it's not. There's a lot of work to be done, y'all. But give it up for yourselves, y'all. You guys are pioneers. You guys are early adopters. Our church is not perfect, but that's one thing that Jesus is looking down on and smiling and saying, yeah, Those people, they're getting it. They got that part of it right? And so, you know what? We're helping fulfill the prayer that Jesus had for the church in John chapter 17. He prayed for the church, and we shared this prayer last year, and he said this. He prayed, I am in them, and you are in me. May they experience what kind of unity, y'all? Perfect unity, that the world will know that you sent me, that you love them as much as you love me. And so that thing that we talked about last week, perfect unity. It's not unity for unity's sake, right? Let's just all come together, but now you have to assimilate and become like me. No, perfect unity says, you know what, I see you. I see you if you're black. I see you if you're white. I see you if you're mixed. I see you if you're whatever you are. And you know what? Come and be you. Be you, because you have a unique flavor to bring to the mix. You have a unique flavor. You have a unique spice, right? And so if you look around this room here, it looks like the city of Tampa. Why? Because we love all of our city. And it's beautiful that around this room you have different colors, different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, all kinds of different dress styles. Man, that's beautiful, isn't it? But here's the thing that makes it even more beautiful. The thing that unifies us is Jesus. It's Jesus. So many of us in here, we found a relationship with him. And so we together have that thing that's in common. We celebrate our diversity, but even more, we celebrate this thing that we have in common. We found Jesus. He's transformed us. He's transforming us now, right? We haven't arrived. God is still working on us, right? But so many of us in here have experienced freedom. How many of y'all have got some freedom? Make some noise if you've got freedom in Jesus, right? And we want other people to experience that. Our mission is to help people discover, develop, display Jesus Christ in every area of their lives. And so last week I shared, you know what, as I get older, I'm learning to assume less and listen more. Because I realized everybody didn't grow up like me, and I didn't grow up like everybody else. And so today we're going to listen a little bit. We're going to listen, because sometimes we don't listen enough. Some of us, we talk too much. We just want to talk about ourselves. But at times, there's moments when we just have to listen to others. So today's message is called Listening and Lamenting. And in just a few moments, I'm going to invite some crossover family members to come out, and we're going to listen to some of their stories. We're going to listen to some of the injustice that they've gone through, some of the discrimination and racism that they have experienced. And then at the end of our worship experience today, we're going to lament and spend some time doing that. I know many of you are sitting there like, what is lamenting? What does that mean? It's not a word that we use often in culture anymore, and it's not something that we do often enough. So here's what lamenting is, if you're taking notes today. A lament is this. It's a passionate expression of grief or sorrow. It also means to mourn a person's loss. Lament is about entering into that experience of brokenness and being honest about it. So let me be honest today. We're honest here, crossover. The church isn't always good at lamenting. It's not. Because we're not really good at lamenting many times, right? Many times we come to church, we'd rather just praise and celebrate, and all that's good because our God is good, but there's moments where we have to carve out some time to also lament. There's some stuff that people are going through, and we got to get through it and talk about it and work through it in a healthy way and grieve. In 2017, I lost both my mother and my father in the same year. It was a challenging year. It was hard. And I thank many of you guys that were part of the church family back then that prayed for me and my family, supported us, loved on us. Man, you guys were awesome. But to be honest with you, there were some moments where I just kind of wanted to run away from the whole situation. And I tried to keep myself busy doing other stuff because I didn't want to think about it. You ever been there before? You have something bad going on in your life and you just try to keep yourself busy so you didn't even think about it. Because here's what lamenting does, y'all. It brings up these feelings, draws out these feelings and emotions that we have that many times we don't want to deal with. We don't want to feel that way. We don't want to cry. And sometimes when you lament, you not only cry, but you might do the ugly cry. Y'all know about the ugly cry? I mean, you look like, oh, I mean, it's not something you want to put on Facebook, right? So But that year, I had to learn to take out some time and some moments to just be still before the Lord and literally and cry and grieve. I lost my parents. Even though I'm a pastor, like, I'm a human. And I know they're with the Lord. They knew Jesus. Praise God. I'm going to see him someday again, right? And that's great. But I missed them. And so I had to learn to lament. And I'll be honest, it made me feel uncomfortable at times. But lamenting can be good. It could be a healthy thing that we need to do. We got to find time to lament even some of the, not just the loss, but some of the injustice that's happened, some of the wrong that's happened against us or people that we love or we care about. And the Jewish people in the Bible, you know what? They were good at lamenting. They often revisited their awful past so they didn't forget about it. They didn't just brush it under the rug, kind of like we do in culture. And so in biblical times, if you would have lost like your dad or your mom or somebody really close to you, you know what they would do? Your employer would give you 1 month of work off. You would have off for an entire month so you could just lament. And then some people that were close to you, they would get some time off to come and just lament with you and maybe just sit with you. Not that they had to say anything, not that they had to do anything, just be there and just maybe put an arm around you, cry with you, rock with you, just be there. That's biblical lament. As a matter of fact, in the Bible, there's an entire book in the Old Testament. It's called Lamentations. It's about lamenting. And in that book, kind of the setting of it, the background is there was basically a catastrophe. In the kingdom of Judah, they were being disobedient towards God, and God allowed an enemy to come in, the Babylonians, and they came in and they destroyed just the entire country, basically. They crushed the people, they destroyed the capital, Jerusalem. A lot of people were killed, and then the people that were still alive, most of them were captured, and they were taken away in exile as slaves to Babylon, over 1,000 miles away. It was basically the death of a nation. It's rough, right? So you look at Lamentations in chapter 3, verse 1, the prophet wrote this, and he said, I am the man who has seen affliction. And he goes on to talk about the pain he's gone through and all the suffering that he's seen. And many of us, we've gone through some pain. We've experienced some suffering. And we got to lament over that. We got to lament what's happened in our country. We got to lament the division that's even in our country right now today. The division that's even in the church. So today is going to be about entering into the pain of others. And it's pain that we all should feel and bear together because we're family, y'all. So today's experience, it's not about solutions. We're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. Today is really kind of be focused on coming to terms with, we live in a world where there's deep issues when it comes to race and injustice. And we need healing from Jesus. He's the one that can offer it. He's the one that can bring it. And so we're going to listen and we're going to lament some of these stories today. So Crossover family, I want you to welcome our panel today. Make some noise for them as they come on out. Come on out, guys. Yeah. So as they come out and take their spaces, I want them to go ahead and introduce themselves to you guys. And so if you guys would tell the family, if they don't know you, your name, if you have an AKA, and where you originally are from.
My name is Belinda Womack, a.k.a. Ms. B. And I'm
Ms.
from
B.
Augusta, Georgia.
My name is David Gaskell, a.k.a. David. I grew up in a small town in South Jersey called Mount Holly, right over the bridge from Philadelphia, the home of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Woo, woo, woo.
My name is Dave Bryan, a.k.a. KD3. I was born in Jamaica, raised in Maryland, and now reside in Palm Bay, Florida.
Hello, my name is Roberto Lira, a.k.a. Roberto, from Mexico City, living in New York, D.C., and Virginia.
My name is Robert Crawford, and I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and yes, I'm a long-suffering Browns fan.
My name is Loriana De Paz, and I have been here in Florida for 17 years, so I'm a Floridian at this point. But I'm from Rhode Island, and before that, military brat, so all over.
All right, so one more time, give it up for our entire panel. So last week, if you were here, you heard a little bit about my story. I originally grew up in the Philadelphia area. All right, go Eagles. And but I grew up in a very diverse environment. A lot of my friends were from all different ethnic backgrounds, and so I never really experienced a whole lot of issues of race or injustice until I was in about 11th grade. My family moved out of the Philadelphia area to a small town in the mountains in the middle of Pennsylvania. And that's when I began to, for the first time, get exposed to people that didn't like other people just because of their skin color and their ethnic background. And then I went to college in the South over in Lakeland, and I noticed even more of that. And so, in some circles, people will assume that I'm white. In some circles, people will assume I'm Hispanic. People regularly come up to me and say, hey, hermano. And I say, hey, ¿cómo está? Hey, yo soy griego, mi esposo puertorriqueña, pero yo... Anyways, if you don't know what all that is, we could talk later. And then in some circles, people think that I'm Middle Eastern. So I've experienced some racism from white people, from Spanish people when I can't keep going with the conversation. They're like, oh, you ain't, and then even from black people at points in times. I've experienced racism, and all kinds of us have experienced racism from different ends in different spaces and places. It's real, across the board. And so you heard a little of my story last week, but I want you to hear the panel story because we have a diverse group of people up here at different ages, from different parts of the country, and there's some stuff that's real. Some stuff even for me at my age, there's some people on this panel that are older than me that came even from a different era. And so we're gonna start with Ms. B. And so Ms. B grew up even when there were still separate water fountains when she was little. And as a matter of fact, this is something that I learned. I didn't realize when you went to the doctors, there was separate rooms for you to go. And so healthcare was even much different depending on what your skin color was. So talk a little bit about some of those healthcare situations you had growing up, Ms. B.
Well, yeah, everything was separate, no matter whether you went to a water fountain or whether or not you walked into a store. You even had a room, a certain door to go into the store. But at the doctor's office, you would go, my doctor, Dr. McGahee, I remembered his name just a couple of hours ago. You went into an alleyway and you went into a side door to get into his office, even though his main office door was on the front. And when you walked in, the room was dirty. I wondered if they ever swept it. And the toys were raggedy. We were all broken toys. Magazines were just a mess. And so at one point, my brother made a junkyard bicycle. And if you don't know what that is, see me in the lobby and I'll tell you all about it. But he made a junkyard bicycle. And I decided that I was gonna take that bicycle and go to the store for my grandmother. And I have a bag of groceries, and back then there weren't plastic bags, there were paper bags, so you were holding the bag and you were riding your bike. And at some point, the bike chain broke and I fell over. And when I fell over, one of the screws that he had put into the bike went into my leg. And when it went into my leg, I laid there for a minute trying to figure out, okay, how I'm gonna do this. Pain hadn't really set in yet, and so I grabbed the handlebars and I yanked the bike. And when I yanked the bike, the screw came out, but all of my ligaments and veins and all kinds of junk came out too. So I'm laying there on the ground and I'm starting to cry now because I'm getting worried. This thing looks like a beautiful colored cauliflower hanging on my leg. And finally someone heard me screaming and crying because by then I was panicking, and someone came and picked me up and took me to my grandmother. And after she did her remedy of the bathtub filled with alcohol and and witch hazel, she decided, I better take you to the doctor. So I had to wait because it was late and the doctor wasn't open. But the next morning she got me to the doctor. We had to call a cab, got me to the doctor. When we went into our little side door, I remember that we sat there for a minute, me crying on her shoulder and this thing still bleeding. She was constantly having to change the wrapping. And finally, they came in. When they came in with the doctor and 2 nurses. And Dr. McGahee told the nurses to take me and put me in the room, and he looked at my grandmother. He said, Rosalie, put your hand over her mouth because I want to hear that gal. Just like that. And they put me on the table, and then these two guys came in. I don't know. I guess that was their duty, was to make sure that they was there for the doctor to assist them when they needed to, and they needed to because they held me down along with the nurses and my grandmother with her hand over my mouth, and she was crying. And he did a few things, and as I looked down, he reached over and grabbed a pair of scissors. And he did not give me Novocaine. He had not dead in the area. He just took the thing and just went, and he cut the cauliflower off of my leg. And by then I'm screaming. No hand over the mouth could even hold my screams. But then he put mercurochrome on it and something else, and wrapped it all up, and told her to get that gal out of here. Another time, that was traumatic enough. And a couple of years later, actually 3 years later to exact, I had a toothache, and my grandmother said, I need to take you over to the dentist. Well, we didn't go to the dentist often, and we only ever went to the dentist when we had a problem. And we didn't have that many problems. Sometimes she couldn't pull the loose tooth, and she'll take us over there. But they took me in, and the tooth wasn't loose at all. It was a molar. What do you call it? The little wisdom tooth trying to come in too early. And I remember he just took this thing that looks like, I don't even know what it looks like. They gave me no anesthesia, nothing, and he pulled it out of my mouth. And to this day, I'm still deathly afraid of dentists. I have to really pray about it when I have to go, even for cleaning. It doesn't matter. But the good news is I might be afraid of dentists, but it didn't make me afraid of white people, even though my dentist was white, and he had absolutely zero compassion for any of his black patients.
So, Miss B, not only did you go through some of those health things from some white people, but there was even some of your own people that you grew up and they treated you differently. So talk about that for a minute. You got it from both ends.
Yeah. Growing up was, my grandmother on my dad's side is German and black. And so she took after her German heritage, so she looks very white. My grandmother on my mother's side is light-skinned, and her father, her real father, her birth father, was white. And so we had all this mixture of Indian and all this other stuff in us, and I was very light-skinned. I'm dark now because I love the sun. I'm always walking in the sun. I'm darker, but I used to be as light as Loriana, or lighter probably. And my grandmother used to always put our hair in two long braids in the back. And so in my classroom, I went to all black school. In my classroom, I looked different, you know, and sometimes I would get scrutiny from them. But during the riots, I'll never forget, in 1969, during the riots, I was coming home from school. We had been put on notice that if you take the bus, and it was the city bus, not the school bus, but if you take the bus home, be careful, because when you get downtown and make your transfer, you may not make it home. You may have to walk the rest of the way. And that's exactly what happened. We get to downtown on Green Street, and we get dropped off, and the buses disappear, and so we had to walk home. Well, as we're walking home, I'm looking down the long road that is now called James Brown Boulevard. It was called 9th Street at that time. And I'm looking down the road, and I see crowds upon crowds of people, and the riots are going on right there in my neighborhood. And I'm walking with a couple of other students, and we're trying to hold on to each other because it was thick by the time we got down to the corner. And all of a sudden, I found myself on the ground. A pastor I didn't even like, had tackled me to the ground because a brick was coming to my head. And as the brick was being thrown, I heard, you don't belong in here, you don't belong here, get out of here. And they called me all kind of names, which I will not repeat in this setting. Those things made me wonder how, where do I belong? Who am I? What should I do? Is there anything to do? The good news is there was a lot to do, and I became a part of the movement to help people understand that, just because you see a skin color, don't call it a thing, because you don't know what that thing is. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So David, growing up, we're going to go from Georgia to South Jersey. And talk to us about what happened to you in high school.
First of all, I'm scared to death of the dentist too, so I think that's normal. The town I grew up, the neighborhood I grew up in was all white. I mean, for blocks and blocks and blocks, there was no black families, no Hispanic families. I mean, it was just lily white. But it's kind of neat how God works, because for some reason they kept rezoning the district like every year, so I ended up going to 5 different schools by the time I was in 8th grade. I went to 2 all-white schools, I went to an all-black school, and then I went to 2 schools that were mixed. And the blessing is that I had friends from all different colors and cultures, and I learned at a young age that people were just people. Color didn't matter, all that really mattered what was in their heart. Fast forward to high school, in high school I was a 3-sport athlete. Sports were my God. And I didn't date a lot, I only dated 2 or 3 girls, just because I was scared to death of them, to be honest with you. But my senior year, there was a girl that I'd known since 2nd grade, and she blossomed into this beautiful young woman, beautiful smile, and she got nominated for homecoming queen, and that's when I really took notice of her. And I knew that little Nancy had a crush on me since like 2nd grade, so I started talking to her and walking her home after school and so forth. And the problem is, Nancy was black, and I was white. And in 1979, that was a no-no. You could play ball with all the black kids, but don't date a black girl, okay? And man, you would have thought I was Charles Manson, boy, because people, they just deserted me. Most of my friends left me, except for my real good ones, who are still my friends to this day. But the teachers were teaching me differently. The principal was rude to me and her. He'd always say, get to class, anytime he saw us talking. My coach, who had been my coach for 3 years, he just pretty much stopped talking to me altogether. He would give the line up to his assistant coach, and he would tell me when I was pitching or if I was where I was batting in the batting lineup. And my parents obviously weren't happy about it. Her parents were happy about it. The neighbors were calling, and gossip was going around. And I remember my dad had told me, he said, if you're going to do this, it's going to be hard. This just isn't accepted. But I just didn't really care what people thought about me. I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. We were good kids. We never got in any trouble. It was pure. It was honest. It was innocent. And we were truly in love. We really were. And near the end of my senior year, they had the big sports banquet, and I was up for the biggest award of the night. And I'll never forget it. We were all in the banquet hall, and we were all dressed up in suit and ties, and my parents were there. And the coach gave out all the awards, and then he came to the last award. It was my award. And he stood up there in front of everybody, and he said, well, we got one more game tomorrow, so I'm going to wait till after the game tomorrow to announce the award, the MVP. And I just remember I was crushed. I mean, 40 years later, and it hurts as I tell you right now, that was my moment, that I worked for, and he stole it from me. And I remember driving home, and my dad said, man, that was dirty. I was like, yeah, that was dirty, Dad. A couple days later, the same guy called my dad, and he said, tell David his trophy's up at the school if he wants to come and get it. And I told my dad, I said, tell him he can keep his trophy. But I calmed down. I went and got my trophy. You better believe that. I still got that trophy. Well, a little while after that, before school, there was a spot where me and Nancy used to meet, and she didn't show up, and her sister showed up, and she was crying, and she said, David, Nancy tried to kill herself. She took a bottle of pills, and she's in Memorial Hospital. So I skipped school, and I ran to the hospital. It was not even a mile away. And when I got there, they had already pumped her stomach, and she wasn't looking too good for sure. She was in the hospital bed, and I walked in, and we hugged, and we cried, and I just kept saying, man, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. My dad said I shouldn't do this, but I didn't listen to him, and I just kept thinking, man, if she had died, I would have had to live with that the rest of my life, you know? Then when the school year got out, her parents sent her to New York to live with her aunt and uncle, and I went off to college, and that essentially ended our relationship. When Pastor Tommy asked me last week if I would talk, I gave Nancy a call. I still stay in touch with her through social media and so forth, and I told her I was going to be talking about this, and she said, David, you know, the only regret I have in my whole life is that we never got to fulfill our relationship on our own terms. And she said, I love you, and I said, I love you too.
Wow. So one more thing, man, I want you to share. David works in the foster care system and works with foster kids, and yeah, loves on those kids. So share about that incident that happened in your car a couple months ago.
Okay, first of all, my foster kids are my kids. I shower those kids with love because they deserve it, and I take them all home if I could.
Yeah.
But I do this visit every other Saturday. I did it yesterday with the same two kids. There's two young black kids, an 8-year-old I pick up in St. Pete, a 12-year-old I pick up in Fort Myers, and I drive them to see their dad. And on the way to this visit a couple months ago, they're in the back seat fighting over a tablet, and the oldest kid says, Mr. So-and-so won't let me use my tablet. And the younger brother, he says, Mr. So-and-so, he's a racist. All white people are racist. And I was like, whoa. So I slowed the car down, and I tilted the rear view mirror so I could look at Junior right in the eye, you know. I said, Junior, you think I'm a racist? He goes, no, Mr. David. I said, well, I'm white. He goes, you're white, Mr. David? And I started laughing. I was like, of course I'm white. What do you think I am? And he looks at me and goes, I thought you were black. I said, why would you think I'm black, Junior? And he said, because you're always good to me. You see, he equated goodness with black and bad with white, but when he saw the love of Jesus, all he could see was goodness. So he assumed I was black.
Yeah. Awesome. So David's also a pastor in South Florida, or on the other coast in Palm Bay area, and you did that song today called Rules. So break down, like, why did you write that? Where did that come from? What was going on?
Big up Jamaica, all the Jamaican people in the place. Bust up the place. Big up Jamaica. Bust up the place. I would try to be real brief. Just so you guys know, I'm of a family of 9 people. I'm the second to last child, and all of us, thank God, by His grace, are still here. And 3 of my siblings are married to white folks. So my sister's married to a white guy, and 2 of my other brothers are married to white females. So there's no prejudice here. But the reason why I wrote that song, Pastor Tommy asked me, hey, do you have anything that deals with injustice? About 2014, my son, little Dave, who used to go to school here, Florida Air Academy, I'm sorry. It's an air school right here in Tampa, in Clearwater, actually. But he was learning how to work on airplanes. And on one of his trips back home, he was shooting back home, and he was on his way, and he got pulled over by a police officer. And obviously, you know, that's going to happen. But he didn't know why he got pulled over. And when the cop came up, he said, hey, you know, there's something wrong with your license plate. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. There wasn't any lights out or anything like that. But lo and behold, to make a long story short, he had his dreads in at the time. He must have been 19, just graduated from high school. And they asked him to please step out the car. He didn't know his rights, didn't know anything about that. So he steps out of the car. They searched his car. They took everything out of the car and put it on the side of the road, left his trunk open, and then told him, you know, we're going to cite you for your tint. Your tint is a little off, so we're going to give you a citation for it. But by the way, his windows were down. He never likes to drive with air conditioners. His windows were down, so they eventually found something to cite him for. And so he calls me after he leaves the scene irate, and he's telling me what's going on. And I was like, man, and so I calmed him down, and I'm thanking God that he stayed polite. He didn't get upset, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of us, you got to respect your authority. Don't you deal with it right there on the spot. Call someone else and let someone else deal with it. But as a child, you honored the authority. So I was grateful that he stayed calm, but it had me so hot that I started thinking, rules are established across the board, but yet there's a certain set or a certain population that for some kind of way, rules are bent to try and control a certain group of people, whether it's white, black, Hispanic. Why is it that the rules change for you? And when people hear the song, Pastor Tommy, they think, my God, are you talking about police officers? Are you talking about, no, I'm talking about any system that would come against the liberty of God. I'm talking about any system that would cause, if we are all one people, to feel like slighted in such a way, whereas someone else is free to do this and someone else isn't. And I talk to my friends that are white all the time. They're like, wow, I never experienced that. And it's sad because you have no idea what it feels like to just be black, to just be walking while black. And again, I'm not prejudiced. I have a lot of white friends. I own a Pilates studio. I work and teach a lot of white people.
Black people do Pilates?
Oh, inhale, exhale. Yes, we do. And it's funny because when they say, well, who's the owner? I said, well, I just work for the boss. You need something? I don't tell them because on several occasions they've come in and heard that I'm the owner and keep walking.
Wow.
So I said, I clean toilets. I work for the boss. I won't tell them who the boss is, but I work for the boss.
Wow. Wow. Give it up for Pastor David. So if you notice there, like rules, the rules can be different for different people. They're applied at different, weight to different people. And so just like he said, he had to worry about his son because he doesn't know if his son's going to be one of the next statistics or a hashtag, right? So that's an experience that not everybody in this room has to worry about that in the same way. But we have to be woke and realize that there's some of our brothers and sisters in Christ that they got to worry about that. And that's a real thing. And that's something that even in the book, Woke Church, if you guys didn't get a book, we got some in the shop. Get it. It's a great book that Eric Mason wrote, Woke Church. That's kind of the basis of where we got some of the ideas for the series. And, we talked about that moment when a lot of African Americans and people of color even just realized, oh, wow, my skin color can be a problem. Or it could be a problem for somebody else. Or the rules can be applied a little bit heavier or different because of the way I look. And so, wow, thank you for sharing that, man. So we're going to move over to this side, and we're going to go all the way down from Jamaica to Mexico. Yes, so Roberto was from Mexico City, Mexican immigrant, became an official citizen 2 years ago. Come on, give it up for that. Went through a lot of hard work, a lot of hoops, a lot of praying, a lot of stress. But share some of your stories as you work in the restaurant industry.
Hello, family. How are you?
Hola.
Hola. So I've been in this country I came here in '96. So years later, I learned the language, and then I was working in a restaurant, and I was waiting on this gentleman. He came, and I was like, hey, sir, how you doing? What would you like to drink? And I gave him all my spiel and everything. So I gave him his drink, and then I gave him the food and everything. So I'm checking on him. He's not saying anything. He's just quiet. And then one of the times I go and I'm like, sir, everything okay? He's like, can I speak to the manager? I was like, sure, no problem. Is there anything wrong, the food or whatever? And then he's like, I just want to speak to the manager. I was like, okay. So I go to my manager and I said, hey, there's a gentleman that wants to speak to you. And then he's like, what do you do, Roberto, now? I was like, I promise I didn't do anything, He didn't tell me why, but he wants to speak to you. He's like, okay. So he goes to speak to the guy, and then 8 to 10 minutes later, he comes back, and he's like, I'm so upset, I'm so sad. I was like, what was going on? He's like, well, first of all, he was calling your names, and he said that you are a criminal and one of those people, and I didn't really, get it back then. I said, okay. And then he's like, sir, he's not like that. I can assure you that. And you know what? I'm going to pay for your food, but I want you to leave my restaurant, So then, I was like, wow. I was like, thinking about it when Pastor T asked me, to come and share some of my stories. And I was like, I realized that this guy's attitude was because he was influenced, ignorant, or he, didn't really know anything about me. He just barely knew me. And the thing about my manager that got him so upset was that he has a daughter that is Hispanic American. So, I was blessed and fortunate that, he stood up for me. And also, like years later, I learned, now that I have a relationship with Jesus, just to forgive people like that because they don't know any better, So, but thank you.
I've been to many restaurants, and he's an amazing, amazing server, man. He takes care of us, man. He's a hard worker. He's awesome. Got a heart of gold. So now we're going to move to Roberto to Robert. And so, Robert, tell us how racism really changed the geography of your family and your family history. Take us to Alabama.
Tuscaloosa. My mom and dad are from Tuscaloosa. Go Bama, roll tide. But my parents were high school sweethearts. He was a football star. My mom was a cheerleader. As soon as she graduated, got married. They had a dry cleaning business, successful. My mom's home was just like she wanted it. My dad looked at her one day and said, I don't want to continue to live in Jim Crow.
What's Jim Crow? Tell everybody if they don't know that.
Jim Crow, as it was a systematic way that minorities, particularly blacks, were kept in their place, just like how Miss B was talking about separate, not equal.
Yeah.
Whereas you could try to advance yourself by either trade, education, factory, whatever, but there, I could come back with a degree, come back to the South, and they would hand me a broom because you weren't given that opportunity. So my dad didn't want for his children to be, suffer from that. So he hopped trains. He told my mother, I'm going north. I'm going to call for you. He hopped trains to get up. The Salvation Army helped him a lot. That's why we always donated to them. Called my mom up. Also, his 8 siblings and their families came up through the house I grew up in before I was born, including my grandparents, and even my dad's dad died in the room I grew up in later, years later. I never even knew that until I was a teenager. But they did that so we could then go to college. And I'm the first person out of my immediate family to go to college. I graduated from college of engineering, and they didn't go to the North with this pie in the sky attitude that, oh, we won't suffer from racism now. But at least there, you could get the opportunity to get through the door with your degree, your trade, your factory, whatever you brought to it. Now, of course, we had to be 5 times better, but that's just how it may even be still now. But we got an opportunity to show what we could do, and we didn't have people always systematically trying to keep us down and oppress, because it's about ignorance, it's about doing things like that. So because of that, all of our generation is from the North because of my dad's vision. And out of those 9 children, he was the second youngest, but he was the leader. They all followed him. And because of that, we have a better opportunity. And now for my daughters, both my married daughters and now my 3 grandsons. And, to go to like a situation similar to how you faced in 1977, my senior year in high school, I had a teacher's assistant, very nice. She gave me encouragement. I really struggled with math, not necessarily math, but going to algebra and different things like that. So she was there to give me encouragement. Oh, you can do it. You're gonna graduate. You're gonna go and be that engineer. Well, just like David, I was an all-state athlete in track, and my coach was in the teacher's lounge, and he overheard her one day across the room whispering to another. She was also she was white, talking to another white teacher. He's so stupid, he'll never be able to grasp this or be an engineer. So when I got my degree, I went back to high school. And I looked for her, but unfortunately she had moved in. But my parents never taught us to hate, to be bitter, and also never to make excuses for what people try to do for you. But that's just the grace of God.
Yeah. And Loriana's got some unique stories, and because she's not what she necessarily looks like. So share a little bit about that, Loriana De Paz.
So now I'm so distracted now. So so I am. My name is Loriana De Paz. Loriana De Paz. Okay, so it is a Hispanic name, but I am often assumed to be otherwise. Whatever you think I am, right? So I grew up raised by a Puerto Rican mother and a Cuban father. Both are born and raised in Bronx, okay, Bronx, New York. And but my father was also in the military, active duty military, which meant that we moved a lot. So every 3 to 4 years, we moved from California to Greece to Florida to Germany. So a lot of background there. So when we were stationed here, my father was stationed here on the East Coast in Florida, actually. My mother is a devout Christian, praying woman. So grateful for her. And so she needed a place of worship. And so we landed in a little church, and it was an all-black gospel church. So yes, I have that is a part of me, okay? However, you heard all black, and I am all white. My mother is dark-skinned, Puerto Rican, dark hair. She fit right in, also raised in New York, so, color was not a thing for my family. And it wasn't for me either. Yes, I noticed that I looked different because all the little girls would play with my hair. They loved to braid my hair, because I had good hair. And so we were friends, we would play, whatever. But my father was also, would have to go away sometimes for months at a time in the military for training or for what have you. And my mother was also an asthmatic, severe asthmatic. She would end up in the hospital for 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks at a time. And so they needed somewhere for me to stay, so naturally she would rely on church families. And I would stay with our church families, different families. And I never thought anything of it until this series. And I never even shared it with anybody until this series. But when I would stay at their houses, they treated me very, very differently. They separated me from their kids. They still fed me, right? They made sure that I had everything that I needed. And they even, what sticks out, what I'll never forget was I went to go, by the way, I was probably between 6 and 8 years old during this time. And I went to go get in the bathtub because it was bath time, and it was my turn. And they said, no, you don't go in there. And I had to stand in front of the sink, and they gave me a washcloth and a bar of soap. And they said, you stand out here, you clean yourself here. And then they closed the door and leave me in there to do it. Which, again, I didn't think anything of it, right? It was just part of, I don't know, it was just that. And, I remember they had the wooden spoon. My mother had the chancla, they had the wooden spoon, And I thought I was just a bad kid. I would be the one that got in trouble for everything. And I never thought anything of it until reading this series. And he talks about, all of the history. And it dawned on me, this was in the 80s. And these parents, these families lived through the injustice of the 60s, right? And their parents lived through the injustice before them. And so I began to realize, how sin doesn't discriminate. The pain, it doesn't discriminate. And so that could have been how they took that out on me. Thankfully, by God's grace and love, I never held that against anybody. I've never been bitter against any other color. I'm white, am I?
So tell about the time your mom hit you in the back of the head.
Oh, yes.
And it kind of almost even connects with that and with what David said.
Yes, I always forget this part of the story. It's probably the part I don't want to remember. So that was kind of my background in that. And then one day we were walking down the street, and my mother stopped and was talking to a gentleman in the neighborhood and really nice guy, and they had a whole conversation, and he goes back in the house, and we keep walking, and I turned and I said, wow, Mom, he was really nice for a black man. And yeah, my mother is Puerto Rican, and so you don't see it coming, and so all I in the back of my head, and I probably didn't see color for a couple of days. Why would you say that? You know, I mean, I got it, and so I never, ever, ever said anything like that ever again. But to go with the story that you heard earlier, as a child, you know, thinking about it, I equated, well, they're mean, and, you know, black people are mean. That's how they treated me. They treated me differently. And not to say that I believe that at all by any means in this day. But just, you know, you equate what you, like he said, you know, good with bad. It doesn't matter what color, it doesn't matter where you're from, it's how you're treated, it's how it's portrayed, it's, you know, so.
So you got that from that side, but then last story, tell about when you worked at this store with the other employee.
Yeah, so I have so many stories, right? Because I'm in the middle. I'm like this middle person, I feel like. So as you heard, my name is Loriana de Paz, right? But a lot of people don't know that about me. I am part Cuban and part Puerto Rican, Cubariqueña all day, okay? I wave my flags proudly. And I was 17 working in a store, and a woman approached me, and she just started talking nasty about another family that was shopping, a Hispanic family, speaking in Spanish, you know, they're just shopping, doing their thing. And I was merchandising, hanging up stuff, and she literally felt the need to come and talk to me about those Spanish people. And I won't say some of the words she used. And, you know, how can you work with them? They just like tear up the store, and they do this and they do that, and just generalizing, you know. And so, like I said before, I had Jesus, you know, I had Jesus. But, and I'm not one to confront somebody, but I'm not one to tell somebody off, but I am one to show somebody off. So I just kind of looked at her, and I said, just like that. And I said, you have a nice day. And I turned and looked at the family, and I said, ¿Cómo puedo ayudarte? ¿Cómo está el día, familia? ¿Cómo están todos? And her eyes got so big, she didn't know what to do, and she turned around, cashed out, and left.
So give it up for the panel one more time, guys. Yeah. So we could take the microphone and pass it around this room, and there would be hundreds of other stories of all kinds of different things that you guys have gone through as well. And so we listened to some stories today, and I pray that there will be some opportunity for you to share your story with someone else in the lobby or later today. But these last few moments we have together, I want us to take a few moments and lament over what you heard. This is your church family up here. And to lament even over some of the things that you've gone through, or some people that you care about and you love that they've gone through as well. So if you pull your notes out, on the back of your notes, there's a thing at the top that says, what do you have to lament about today? And so if you took notes, you can take a picture of your notes, maybe even take a picture of the lamenting. And we're going to take a few moments, and Darnell's going to play and worship a little bit. And as he's doing that, I want us to just take some moments to lament. And Pastor Christopher is going to bring over this little pot. And at any given time, after you finish writing down what you are writing down to lament about, and as we're worshiping, you can bring that up here and just put it inside of this pot and let it go. And after service, we're going to burn all those things that are in there, not here in the building, but right out front as you leave, you're going to see that on fire. We're basically saying to God, we've lamented about this, and we're going to let it go. And so I know there's two kinds of people in here today, and there's some people like the people on the panel that they've experienced some injustice and gone through some things, but they've healed and they've gotten past it. So if that's you and you're here today, that's great, but take some time to lament and don't forget what you went through. Sometimes we just want to forget stuff. God many times wants us to remember it so we can help somebody else through it later. Or if it comes up again, which it may, injustice may come up again in your life, it may happen tomorrow, you'll know how to better deal with it, and you have the tools because you navigated it before. So there's a group of you in here, and worshiping online, that's where you're at. Then there's another group of you today that maybe you've never let some of this stuff go. You've never healed from it yet. Some stuff you're still holding on to. Maybe you've never wanted to lament about it or even feel it because it got you so frustrated and upset, and there's some stuff that you need to let go of today. So wherever you're at in that scenario, I encourage you guys, take the next few minutes, write some stuff down, pray a little bit, come up and bring it in here. At any point, if you want to come up and pray at the front for a few minutes, and go ahead and do that. Healing is here, guys. Know that, because Jesus is here.
And healing is here. And healing is here. And healing is here. And I receive it. And healing is here. And healing is here. And healing is here. And I believe it. Healing is here. Healing is here. And healing is here. And I believe it. So I reach my hand to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from. I look to you, my rock, my healer. I trust in you. And freedom is here. Freedom is here. Freedom is here. And I receive it. Oh, freedom is here. Freedom is here. And freedom is here. And I believe it. Oh, so I reach my hands to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from. I look to you, my rock, my healer. I trust in you. And I reach my hand to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from.
I would invite you to stand up around the room. If you still have something to bring up, we're going to leave this up here for another minute or so. If you still want to come up, I want you to grab the hands of the person that's next to you. Father, we come before you today with heavy hearts. Hearts that are healing, but still heavy in the sense of the injustice that many people have experienced, even in this room. God, we've taken some moments to lament today. God, I pray it won't be the last time that we take moments like this, that we'll learn that this can be part of our rhythm at points in our life. We can carve out some time to just lament and grieve in a healthy way. Deal with some of the sorrow and process it in the way that we need to. God, I pray for everything that was written down, that was put in that pot today. God, you saw every one of your children go through it. You know what they felt. God, I thank you that many in this room are already healed and they have freedom from it. But I know that there's some here that, man, they're still wrestling with it. And I pray that today can be the beginning, the catalyst to real healing and real peace in this area, God. God, I thank you for Crossover Church. God, I thank you. I have the honor and the privilege to lead such a special group of people like this, a diverse group of people like this, that so many of us have pushed past a lot of these things, and we worship together, we serve together, we do life together. We celebrate our diversity, but we come together in you. God, I pray that there can be many, many other houses of worship that can be like this. And I pray that churches like ours can become major tools of healing and reconciliation and hope for our country that's so divided right now. So God, we pray for that same prayer that Jesus prayed when he said he wants his church to come together in perfect unity. God, protect our unity. Help us to be agents of change, God, and reconciliation in our jobs, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, everywhere that we go, as we love our city well. God, we thank you for what you're doing in this house. Pray you'll continue to work through this series, God, and bring healing and restoration. We pray all these things in your precious name. Amen. Come on, give it up for the Lord today, guys. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for hanging with us a couple of minutes longer than normal. It was a little longer today, but it was good, right? It was good. So here's what I want to do. I want to invite you guys to invite somebody to come next week as this series. Wasn't this good? People need to hear this kind of stuff. If you know some people that have gone through some stuff with race and injustice, like invite them to be here next week. We're going to continue the series. And again, want to remind you, if you're here as first, second, or third time guests, we have a gift for you in the center of the lobby. If you want to pray or you need to talk to someone, our prayer room is open right over there to the right. You don't have to be in a rush. Ask somebody about their story today. Ask them. Our guest artist, he's out there in the lobby. The panel is going to be out there. If you want to hug them, show them some love, talk to them a little bit more. And we love you guys. Let's read our mission statement as we get ready to dismiss together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Our mission is to empower people, discover, develop, display. God bless you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Stay woke.